Resuming debate, Senator Simons.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Because I have spoken at some length and at several opportunities about this bill and its precursor, Bill C-10, I will not today dwell on my philosophical concerns about the purpose and nature of Internet regulation. Today, instead, I want to hone in very specifically on some of the key and critical amendments that we made to this bill in committee. As you have heard, we heard from more than 130 witnesses and had hours of often impassioned debate. And what we have before us today is not the original Bill C-11, first introduced in the other place, and not the bill that was sent to us as amended by our other place colleagues. What we have before us today is a significantly improved bill as amended by our committee. It includes important amendments that make the bill clearer, amendments that stress the importance of freedom of speech and freedom of audience choice, amendments that celebrate and bolster Canada's cultural diversity, and amendments that ensure that Canadians and Canadian artists who post user-generated content to social media are not captured by the legislation. We heard from academic and legal experts, from media corporations large and small, foreign and domestic, and of course from brilliant artists and creators who are using online platforms in bold and experimental ways to tell their unique stories and share their unique visions. We heard and we responded. Senator Dasko successfully championed amendments that underlined the vital importance of innovation, including technical innovation, to Canada's broadcast system. This was a welcome amendment because it signaled that we don't want a broadcasting system that's frozen in amber, but one that is responsive to technological and social change. Senator
Miville-Deschênes successfully proposed an amendment. It is based on the advice of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. It aims to protect the privacy of consumers and creators, to ensure that social media cannot exploit their personal information. For his part, Senator Cormier defended amendments to emphasize the importance of protecting official language minority broadcasters, as well as a key amendment reaffirming the importance of Canada's independent producers. Senator Clément was successful in passing amendments that recognize the unique needs of Indigenous, Black, and racialized groups.
Olin won our support for an amendment that underlined the importance of freedom of expression and journalistic independence. Senator Batters successfully championed an amendment that helped to clarify the definitions around community broadcasting and the way community broadcast boards are structured, while I worked in tandem with Senator Dasko to push through an amendment that relieved community broadcasters of a unique responsibility to fight disinformation. Senators Quinn and Cormier gave us amendments to require greater transparency from the CRTC in its reporting, and Senator Downs succeeded in having us adopt an amendment to prevent the CBC from running advertorial, what's sometimes known in the industry as native advertising or sponsored content, that is to say, advertising that creates the illusion of being journalistic content when it's actually a cleverly disguised commercial. These were among the amendments which I believe make C-11 a better bill. But there were also two other key amendments that I wish to discuss at further length today. The first, as mentioned by Senator Dasko, involved the change to Section 7, Sub 7. Several expert witnesses, including Monica Auer, the Executive Director of the Forum for Research and Policy and Communications, Dr. Robert Armstrong, a broadcasting consultant, economist, and former CRTC manager, and Ian Scott, who was then head of the CRTC, testified before our committee about their concerns that Section 7, Sub 7 of the bill could give new and unprecedented power for Cabinet to intervene in independent CRTC decisions. As Dr. Armstrong put it in his testimony before us, and I quote, "In this sense, Bill C-11 reduces enormously, potentially, the powers that the CRTC has and hands them over to the Government of Canada." He continued, quote, "If you look in detail at what the government is giving itself through this particular clause, it's giving itself a whole series of very detailed opportunities to, in my view, interfere with the normal functioning of the CRTC." In the face of these concerns raised by multiple independent experts, we agreed as a committee to completely delete Clause 7, Sub 7 in its entirety. and to maintain the CRTC's independence from the potential for government micromanagement. But I think the biggest and most critical amendment we made was to the vexing part of the bill known as Part 4.2 Sub 2, which I like to call the exception to the exception clause. In the wake of some of the controversy around Bill C-10, the Minister of Heritage promised that this bill, C-11, would not pertain to nor capture users of social media, but only big streamers who were analogous to traditional broadcasters. And indeed, that is what Section 4.1 Sub 1 of the bill says, that the Act does not apply to a program that is uploaded to a social media service by a user of that service. Unfortunately, Section 4.2 Sub 2 of the bill, as it came to our committee, undid that assurance by giving the CRTC the power to scope in a program uploaded to a social media service if it directly or indirectly generated revenues. That exception to the exception clause rightly worried all kinds of small and not so small independent producers who use services such as YouTube and TikTok to distribute their programming, though they retain the copyright. At the same time, the government insisted it couldn't simply exempt all social media platforms from Bill C-11 because some large commercial broadcasters and large record labels were using services such as YouTube and Facebook to release or re-release commercial content. If we exempted social media entirely, we were told, it would give YouTube an unfair market advantage over a music streaming service such as Spotify or Amazon Prime when it came to the release of music by major record labels. It could also allow commercial broadcasters to do an end run around CanCon rules and regulations that they'd potentially be subject to on other platforms. So, after extensive consultation with a wide variety of Francophone and Anglophone stakeholders and legal experts, from music producers to digital creators to academics, Senatrice Meuville-Deschênes and I and our offices came up with an amendment which we believe, and which the majority of our committee members believe, will help to address this knotty problem. Our amendment to Section 4.2 Sub 2 removes all mention of revenues, whether direct or indirect. Instead, it focuses on whether or not a piece of content has already been broadcast on a conventional commercial service, and or whether it has a unique identifier number that is assigned to commercial recordings. In other words, our amendment would mean that if a broadcaster such as Rogers or CBC reposted a baseball game or a news documentary to YouTube or Facebook, such a rebroadcast would still be captured by the provisions of C-11. Our amendment would also ensure that if a major record label, such as Sony, released a new single or album on YouTube, that posting would be treated in a way that was akin to the release of a song on Spotify or Amazon or Tidal. At the same time, digital creators, including commercially successful ones, would be properly and clearly exempted from C-11, even if they uploaded their comedy or music or animation or film or TV episodes to YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or some other social media platform we cannot yet predict or imagine. In other words, my friends, the bill now says, platforms in, users out. I'm sorry that not everybody is here to hear me say those words, but it says platforms in, users out. Is it sexy? Well, my idea of what's sexy may not be your idea of what's sexy. But I think Senatrice Meuville-Deschênes and I have given a very nice workaround to a problem. Is it a perfect solution? Well, no, it probably isn't. Public policy perfection is hard to come by at the best of times, and even more so when you have so many competing cultural, social, economic, and political interests at play. But I believe, and I think our committee in balance believes, that this is a workable compromise, one that the government should not just accept, but embrace. As you will doubtless recall, I have been quite critical of Bill C-11 since its inception, and somewhat dubious of any government's capacity or obligation to curate what Canadians can see and hear. And there are still things in this bill that I believe to be philosophically wrong-headed, although to compare this bill to the draconian regimes of Hitler and Stalin is a grievous insult to the memories of all who suffered and died at their hands, including members of my family. But I believe that our committee's amendments have made substantive and substantial improvements to the legislation and address several of its deepest flaws. Thus today, colleagues, I commend our revised version of Bill C-11 to you, and I invite you to accept it as amended, and in so doing, to send to the government the clear message that it is this bill, as amended, which has earned your support. Thank you, merci, and hi-hi.